In each century, since the beginning of the world, writes Frances Hodgson Burnett, wonderful things have been discovered. In the last century, more amazing things were found out than in any century before. In this new century, hundreds of things still more astounding will be brought to light. At first, people refuse to believe that a strange new thing can be done, and then they begin to hope it can be done, and then they see it can be done, and then it is done, and all the world wonders why it was not done centuries ago. One of the new things people began to find out in the last century was that thoughts, just mere thoughts, are as powerful as electric batteries, as good for one as sunlight is, or as bad for one as poison. Published way back in 1911, Frances Hodgson Burnett's story of The Secret Garden is one of the most beloved children's books of its era, and still has the power to utterly enthrall its readers, young and old alike. Its theme of deep healing, transformation and renewal is key to its enduring appeal. The author, of course, had a long association with Christian Science, which took a very holistic view of health for its times, that many, of course, regarded as complete quackery. Since then, yet still for the most part outside the mainstream, this way of looking, not new, of course, but resurrected and remembered from our ancient deep past, has developed enormously. Within our current epoch, Freud was perhaps the first to introduce the notion of psychosomatic illness. More recently, authors like Bruce Lipton, whose best-selling book, The Biology of Belief, has challenged the core dogma of the medical model, showing that even genes, once thought to be absolutely fixed, are amenable to environmental influence. The book by Barbara Summers, Symptom as Symbol, sheds further light upon the deep effects of consciousness upon our health, revealing how our inner state can strengthen or undermine our immune system. And of course, no one can forget Louise Hay's groundbreaking list of relationships between various illnesses and emotional states in her book, You Can Heal Your Life. All represent extremely challenging ways of looking at health that very often cannot be even hinted at. People react passionately, angrily even. These are not the ways we are used to. Caroline Myss, the American medical intuitive, describes many such reactions in her acclaimed book, Why People Don't Heal and How They Can. People will often cling to their ailment, she says, seemingly unsympathetically. She is just like young Mary in The Secret Garden, who fiercely challenges poor Colin and his entrenched belief, supported by and colluded with by many around him, that he is very likely to be a cripple with a hunchback who dies prematurely. A ghastly fate for anyone, and yet his condition gives him carte blanche to behave outrageously, ruling the roost like a little tyrant, which merely serves to exacerbate his problems, until cousin Mary arrives, newly orphaned from India, to join him at Misselthwaite Manor. It feels very much like Colin has become the identified patient, spoken of frequently in family dynamics, where one member expresses the family's real inner conflicts. In such instances, the overt symptoms of the identified patient draw attention away from the elephants in the room no one talks about, yet which need to be addressed. The story that follows in The Secret Garden is one of profound healing for Mary, for Colin, his grief-stricken father, and for Misselthwaite Manor itself, which comes alive again with the happy sound of children's laughter and contented staff, all somehow magically released from the dark spell that grips them. And all occurs in tandem with the discovery of a key to a secret garden and the coming of spring. "I don't know what to call it," says Colin, when searching for a word to sum up the powerful force that appears to aid their recovery. "So I will call it magic." And magic certainly it seems to be, the magic of belief, of love, friendship and nature. And the one character that seems to embody this quality more than any other is Dickon, the moor boy, who soothes and charms the battered souls of the children from start to finish. Dickon Sowerby is, in some sense, the spirit of Misselmoor. His eyes are described as looking like pieces of moorland sky, and he smells of heather and grass and leaves as if he were made of them. He is first introduced to us, sitting under a tree, playing a flute, deliberately reminiscent of Pan, the great nature god, who wove the world into being with his song. Thereafter Dickon, in his totally unassuming and unaffected way, propels the story onward, bringing the children into harmony with themselves and with nature. It's Dickon who first brings Mary the seeds for the garden and gently transforms her with his kindness from Mary, Mary, quite contrary, the hard-hearted little girl who neither liked anyone nor was liked by anyone, not even her mother, into the happy, healthy child she becomes by the end of the story, totally unrecognisable to herself and everyone else. Even her complexion loses its sickly yellow hue, and her thin, limp hair shines and grows thick. There's a wise and gentle Robin, too, who plays a part, the one who first shows her the way to the garden, where the magic begins, and a rough at the edges, yet kindly gardener, who has been secretly climbing over the wall to the secret garden and pruning the roses within. It's this shut up and forbidden garden, of course, which is at the root of all the problems at Misselthwaite Manor. Locked up by Mr. Archie Craven, Colin's father, who threw away the key after his beautiful young wife Lilias fell there and subsequently died, giving birth to Colin prematurely 10 years before. Mr. Craven died too then, in a way, sinking down deep into depression, not caring nor being able to even bear looking at the frail new baby, who was not expected to live out his first few weeks. Mr. Craven had gone away then, leaving the poor thing sequestered in his room under the care of others, hired in to take care of him. But, as those who know the story are all too aware, he survived, but like poor Mary, who had likewise been given over to servants to raise back in India, he did not thrive, as she had not, and by the time the two meet, they are both very sad, bitter, and broken little creatures. In contrast, all the local Moor children, though dirt poor, are brimming with rude health. Susan Sowerby, Dickon's mother, has 11 others aside from him in her tiny cottage, all robust and hearty, with rosy red cheeks and bright eyes. Mrs. Sowerby, of course, is no ordinary mother, and she plays a discreet and yet powerfully nurturing role in everyone's recovery. It's Mrs. Sowerby who sends a skipping rope over for Mary when she first arrives, to get her exercising and building up her strength. Later, she sends fresh milk and delicious homemade buns, boiled eggs and hot baked potatoes with butter. And it's she who boldly speaks to Mr. Craven, suggesting Mary be allowed to roam free. And she later writes to him in Italy, after Colin's recovery, suggesting it might be time to come back home. Mary first heard the stories about the garden from Martha the housemaid, who told her how it had belonged to Colin's mother, that Mr. Craven had locked it up and thrown away the key when she died. And Mary was determined to find it, and she did, and later she showed it to Dickon, who helped her clear it and ready it for spring. At first it felt like a stolen garden, and in a way it was. But when Mr. Craven, on a short trip home, had asked her if she wanted anything, she'd asked for a bit of earth where she might grow seeds. Yes, he had said, take it from anywhere and bring it back to life. She felt better after that, but she determined it should all remain a secret. Not long after this, she'd discovered Colin. Late one night, when she'd crept into his room, she'd heard him crying and gone in search of the noise. No one had even told her he existed. She cheered him up from the get-go with all her tales of India and soothing stories her ayah had told her. But she didn't tell him about the garden, not until she could trust him. He was often mean and imperious, she observed, making everyone's life a misery. He even turned on her when she didn't come to his room exactly when ordered, and descended into a hysterical fit that involved the entire household. That's when she gave him what for, as the locals might say. She stamped her foot and commanded him to stop screaming. "I hate you," she continued. "Everybody hates you. I wish everybody would run out of the house and let you scream yourself to death. You will scream yourself to death in a minute, and I wish you would." Now, a nice, sympathetic child could never have thought nor said such things, but it just happened that the shock of hearing them was the best possible thing for this hysterical boy whom no one had ever dared to restrain or contradict. "I can't stop," he gasped and sobbed. "I can't, I can't." "You can," shouted Mary. "Half that ails you is hysterics and temper. Just hysterics, hysterics, hysterics." And she stamped her foot each time she said it. "I felt a lump. I felt it," choked out Colin. "I knew I should. I shall have a hunch on my back, and then I shall die." And he sobbed and wailed. Such direct challenges can have perilous consequences, of course, evoking extreme reactions, fight or flight, defensiveness and/or attack. And in many such contexts, like therapy, they are not appropriate. But Mary Lennox is not a therapist. She is a friend, which is a very different kind of relationship. Yet to succeed, her confrontation must be tempered with compassion. And when Colin's hysteria dissolves into little boy lost sobs, she is immediately there to comfort and reassure. She inspected him closely then, running her hand up and down his pale, bony back, and after a few moments thankfully declared, "There's not a single lump." Poor Colin! What a victim of rumour and others' fears he had become. But bold little Mary opens the door to hope, love, grace, and nature. Later, she tells him she's found the secret garden, and next day Dickon brings his creatures, including a newborn lamb, to the house to meet him. And very soon after, with spring in the air, he is taken out to see the garden for himself. And on his very first visit, he dares to try standing up on his pale, thin, wobbly legs for the first time in years, and declares, "I shall get well. I shall get well. Mary, Dickon, I shall get well, and I shall live for ever and ever and ever." Little by little, and day by day after that, he gets stronger and stronger. Spring turns to summer, summer fades to autumn, and at last the troubled Mr. Archie Craven returns to Misselthwaite Manor, prompted by Susan Sowerby's bold letter and a dream in which his dear wife calls to him from the garden. Suddenly after that, he felt the life force returning to him. The magic was reaching out to claim him too, and drawing him back to the enchanted garden, to find his poor abandoned son now strong and standing up as straight and as tall as any lad in Yorkshire. In closing, the author writes, "So long as Mistress Mary's mind was full of disagreeable thoughts about her dislikes and sour opinions of people, and her determination not to be pleased or interested in anything, she was a yellow-faced, sickly, bored and wretched child. When her mind gradually filled itself with robins and moorland cottages crowded with children, with queer, crabbed old gardeners and common little Yorkshire housemaids, with springtime and with secret gardens coming alive day by day, and also with a moor boy and his creatures, there was no room left for the disagreeable thoughts which affected her liver and her digestion and made her yellow and tired. So long as Colin shut himself up in his room and thought only of his fears and weaknesses, and reflected hourly on humps and early death, he was a hysterical, half-crazed little hypochondriac who knew nothing of the sunshine and the spring, and also did not know that he could get well and could stand upon his own feet if he tried to do it. When new, beautiful thoughts began to push out the old, hideous ones, life began to come back to him. His blood ran healthily through his veins, and strength poured into him like a flood. In the end, Colin's good thoughts were able to overcome the dark cloud that kept him bed-bound and afraid for 10 long years. But not all are so fortunate. Some things cannot be wished true, some say. What do good thoughts bring to those who have no legs at all, or who have nothing to eat, or whose parents are dead and gone, like Colin and Mary? They know for sure that no earthly magic can bring back their mothers, and even the garden is not a fixed haven like that of the heavenly paradise. Winter will come to the secret garden. There is no escape, and all will wither and die in its season. So, what do we say to this? Does it invalidate this story completely? Or is the truth much, much more complex? And could it be that in some mysterious, yet to be understood way, both realities are true?